This is the evening news for Wednesday, May 28, 2014. I'm Michael Young. Thanks for joining us. Making the headlines tonight. Hundreds of public sector workers not paid. 44th annual meeting of the CDB's Board of Governors opens. PSC worried about increased crime rate, and Mayo Angelo dies at 86. Let's get right into tonight's top stories. Let's tell you first that head of the Presidential Secretariat, Dr. Roger Luncheon, says that the government will not stand idly by as workers in the public sector are not paid as a result of the budget disapprovals made by the opposition. Details in this report.
Head of the Presidential Secretariat, Dr. Roger Luncheon, today expressed concern of the large amounts of workers in the public sector who have not been paid because of the undue budget disapprovals. Speaking at his post-cabinet media briefing today at the office of the President, Luncheon declared that the ruling People's Progressive Party's civic government would not and could not sit idly by and allow workers to suffer as well as struggle.
It is not the intention of the administration to sit idly talking about what to do as the livelihood and the welfare of hundreds of employees, many of them pensionable civil servants appointed by the Public Service Commission, are adversely affected.
Luncheon also pointed out that the government will be taking the steps outlined in the Constitution and in accordance with court rulings to ensure that workers are paid.
It is our contention that leads us to expected course of action that the Constitution and court rulings at the constitutional court level point clearly, unambiguously, to the solution, to the option that the administration would be adopting.
With that being said, Luncheon contended that the Minister of Finance will soon be approaching the House with supplementary legislation.
My anticipation is that the Minister of Finance, buttressed by the powers and the authority conferred on him in the Constitution, armed with the rulings of the Constitutional Court, would be providing a timely response to what essentially we hope would be a short-lived denial.
Workers from the Office of the President, the Government Information Agency and the Public Works Ministry have not received salaries as a result of the disapprovals in the 2014 budget. For the evening news, I'm Gabriella Patram.
A Grove man was today granted bail after he was charged with threatening to kill his wife after discovering some inappropriate Facebook chat messages. Shania Singh reports.
Ganesh Ram Singh today appeared at the Georgetown Magistrates Court before Magistrate Anne McLennan to answer to a charge of using threatening language. The charge alleged that on May 26, 2014 at Grove East Bank, Demerara, he threatened to kill his spouse Indrani Gafoor after he accused her of having inappropriate conversations with men on Facebook. The complainant and defendant got into an argument and he told her that he would choke her to death. The woman became fearful for her life and made a report to the police in his absence. He was arrested and charged and given a bail of $10,000 and placed on a peace bond. He is scheduled to reappear at the court on June 2, 2014.
Thanks, Shania. The 44th annual meeting of the Caribbean Development Bank's Board of Governors opened at the Ghana International Conference Center today, with President Donald Ramotar and the chairman of the board, Dr. Ashni Singh, renewing calls for a collective approach in addressing issues affecting the region. Svetlana Marshall was there and she filed this report.
Because the region needs to consolidate its gains. It needs to build on its successes. It needs to immunize itself from some of the difficulties that exist. And it needs, of course, still needs. It will be a tragedy if we retrogress, and we still need, in many, many ways, some type of concessional arrangement to ensure that our progress would be steady.
That was President of Ghana, Donald Ramotar, delivering the opening remarks before Prime Minister Samuel Hinds, Prime Minister Denzel Douglas, Premier Ruben Mady, Ministers and Governors of the Caribbean Development Bank, and President of the Caribbean Court of Justice, Sir Dennis Byron. Ghana's Finance Minister, who today acted in the capacity of the Chairman of the Board of Governors, said at the dusk of half a century of nationhood, the small states of the Caribbean appear no less vulnerable. He explained that the single Caribbean identity and the value of oneness continue to fade.
Regionalist fervor is being supplanted by parochialist caution, openness by inwardness, competition by protectionism, ideological passion by myopic opportunism. We in the region seem to be happier contesting against and amongst each other than contesting together against the rest of the world. Whether the latter is a sign of our times or the zone of greater comfort for us, the inevitable consequence is suboptimal productivity and competitiveness, and the unavoidable victim is the Caribbean citizen, no matter how unbeknownst to him for the time being.
He is convinced that this challenge can be effectively handled through the demonstrable practical successes in the integration effort, not within the corridors of the regional bureaucracy, but in the streets and marketplaces. He emphasized that certain priority projects for a more effective and competitive single regional space have been languishing for far too long, noting that they must be restored. Amongst these are the reductions of vulnerability to climate change, the achievement of greater food security in the region, the achievement of greater energy security, especially by harnessing clean and renewable sources, resolving critical gaps in transport and communications infrastructure, and addressing legislative, regulatory, and institutional impediments to intra-regional trade. Svetlana Marshall reporting for the Evening News.
Meanwhile, the Caribbean Development Bank's President Dr. Warner Smith said the region must unlock the opportunities for competitiveness and growth through the capitalization of renewable energy, contending that far too long Caribbean countries are affected by the high price of electricity. Details from Svetlana Marshall again.
Delivering an insightful presentation during the opening ceremony of the 44th annual meeting of the Caribbean Development Bank's Board of Governors, Dr. Warren Smith said the region's inability to achieve high rates of economic growth is due to its lack of competitiveness, which is linked to the high price of electricity. He said the Caribbean's competitiveness landscape cannot be transformed without a frontal attack on energy costs and the generally poor state of the electricity infrastructure.
The combination of high diesel and heavy fuel oil costs and the inherent inefficiency of diesel technology, the technology which most of us use. And this accounts for the majority of the generation in all borrowing member countries. These are the principal contributors to our high electricity costs. Further, these fuel prices are subject to the volatility of international oil markets, which are highly responsive themselves to shifts in geopolitics. Second, small market size and the absence of economies of scale in the generation of electricity only serve to compound our problem.
It was pointed out that many of the generation facilities in the region are gradually approaching the end of their useful life, many being more than 20 years old. But Dr. Smith made it clear that despite the perception created, the Caribbean is not energy poor.
Guyana alone has enough renewable energy potential, mainly in the form of hydropower, to meet all of its electricity requirements for the foreseeable future. It has enough power, potential power, to supply all of the needs of its immediate neighbors, such as Grenada and even Trinidad and Tobago, and still have enough left over to sell to neighboring Brazil. The situation is similar for Suriname. But additionally, ladies and gentlemen, Dominica, Grenada, Montserrat, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines have great potential to generate their entire baseload electricity requirements from geothermal sources.
It is time the region creates the requisite path for the effective development of renewable energy technology, he said, noting that the reduction in prices could result in the required transformation in the energy landscape. Jamaica, he said, has the potential to meet up to 30% of its electricity needs from renewable sources such as wind, solar, mini hydro, and waste energy. But this is not limited to Jamaica, but other countries within the region. However, in moving forward, there is need for legislative and regulatory changes.
We need to change the legislative framework at the national level in order to facilitate access for renewables by altering the monopoly on generation where this exists in borrowing member countries. Revisions in the framework should ensure equitable pricing for supply from independent power providers or small distributed renewable generators of electricity.
Dr. Smith said all BMCs should follow in the footsteps of Barbados and Jamaica, which have already enacted supporting legislations. Countries should ensure equitable tariffs and rules for optimal performances are in check, thereby ensuring that there is a level playing field among consumers, investors, and the government. Reporting for the Evening News, I'm Svetlana Marshall.
I totally reject that. Sorry. I totally reject that. And I say it's a confounded lie. I know nothing about that. I don't know where that is coming from. I think it's all meant to undermine the Ministry of Home Affairs. Let them produce the rejection letter. I am. I want the rejection letter to be produced and published in the Kaieteur News.
Rohi was at the time responding to questions posed by Kaieteur News editor Adam Harris on allegation that the government had maliciously refused to grant visas to 2 Indian engineers. The engineers were being brought into the country by Glenn Lal to work on a confectionery factory. The allegation is that the former president and his High Commissioner to India, Ronald Gajraj, had denied visas to the Indian engineers that he, Lal, had contracted to come to Guyana to set up the machinery and provide technical assistance. At the launching of the Surya Manufacturing Inc., the confectionery company at its Eccles industrial site location last week, Lal had said that the visa denials by the Jagdeo administration were because the company was connected to him. The company is owned by Lal's daughter and a son-in-law. When the Evening News last week made contact with Lal for a comment, he told this newscast that all he had to say was already published in the Kaieteur News. The Evening News was attempting to find out the names of the engineers and the reason why he had taken such a long time before lodging his complaint.
26-year-old youth child Frank of Lot 40, Victoria, today appeared at the Georgetown Magistrates Court before Magistrate Fabio Azor to answer to a charge of trafficking narcotics. The charge alleged that on May 26, 2014 at Hatfield Street, Georgetown, the defendant had in his possession 2.5 grams of cocaine for the purpose of trafficking. Bail was refused by the magistrate and he is scheduled to reappear at the court on June 12, 2014. You're tuned to the Evening News. More news after these messages. Stay with us. Welcome back. I'm Michael Young and you're tuned to the Evening News. Political activist and Working People's Alliance co-founder UC Quayana yesterday told members of the Walter Rodney Commission of Inquiry about the stringent measures placed on press freedom during the 1970s and the government of that era, the People's National Congress reform. Details in this report.
Kwayana was profound in his representation of the facts at the inquiry, relating that the Working People's Alliance was on a quest to provide information for all Guyanese. He said that the government of the day, in an effort to silence the party, had stripped the political institution of that right when a ban was placed on printing materials.
There had been a ban on newsprint. Newsprint had been restricted. So those here who know about the right to freedom of expression, and those are the rights that have to do with communication, would see that the population was under severe restraint.
The situation was so severe, Kwayana recalled, that printing houses were afraid of conducting business with the party for fear of victimization from the government. He said the party was forced to apply to the government for a quota of a printing paper, which it in turn sent to a printing house in Port of Spain, Trinidad. However, all was not well.
When our newspaper arrived, it was seized at the customs, and it was not banned as subversive literature. Oh no, the government was too conscious and too devoted to the people to talk of subversive literature.
The ban on newsprint materials, Kwayana told the Commission, was just one of the many forces used by the Burnham-led regime of the 1970s and 80s after the Working People's Alliance came on the scene. In his continued evidence today, Kwayana, referring to the evidence tendered to the Commission's Secretariat, noted that the former head of state, Forbes Sampson Burnham, had publicly declared his intention to rid the country and the political arena of the Working People's Alliance and the People's Progressive Party led by the late Dr. Cheddi Jagan. Burnham, he recalled, was addressing the party's third biennial Congress at the National Exhibition Park, Sophia. The words spoken by Burnham read, and I quote, "The worst possible alternative has no use, as their pickets outside Eve Leary last month showed, for the formal opposition, because they say the leader of the formal opposition does not know what he is doing. Comrades, we are now in the Roman amphitheater. The lion and the gladiator cannot both survive. One must die, and the People's National Congress will live." Asked to explain the statement, Kwayana said that he surmised it must be that Burnham was speaking directly to the Working People's Alliance. For the Evening News, I'm Alexis Rodney.
Citing the large turnout of witnesses to testify in the Rodney Commission of Inquiry, Dr. Roger Luncheon says that the offer of immunity to persons may not have been necessary in the first instance. Details in this story.
While pointing out that the response from witnesses to testify in the Rodney Commission of Inquiry is overwhelming, Cabinet Secretary Roger Luncheon says that the offer of immunity to witnesses might not have been required.
Witnesses after witnesses recount details of that period. The grant of immunity from prosecution seems to have been unnecessary. It has been minimally used to facilitate testimony because witnesses have volunteered and others have favorably responded to being summoned by the Commission.
Luncheon pointed out that the testimonies given thus far in the Commission have been revealing.
The ongoing hearings before the three commissioners continue to be a source of revelations for Guyanese local and in the diaspora, for Dr. Rodney's friends, his admirers, and particularly those to whom he was an icon and who he influenced.
He said that the administration remains steadfast in its quest to bring closure to the circumstances surrounding Rodney's death.
The administration's expectation is that the proceedings, as they evolve, would generate the demand for answers, the demand for clarity, And that demand would only enlarge the numbers of witnesses at the inquiry and thus contribute to its objective of bringing closure.
The COI reconvened on Tuesday with former Working People's Alliance member UC Kwayana testifying. Several other witnesses, including Rupert Rupnarine, are to take the stand before the inquiry concludes. For the Evening News, Alexa.
39-year-old Jason Cummins of Law 337 East Rhineville today appeared at the Georgetown Magistrates Court before Magistrate Fabio Azor to answer to a charge of possession of narcotics. The charge alleged that on May 25, 2014, the defendant had in his possession 1 gram of an ecstasy tablet. It was discovered by police ranks who were searching vehicles at the time. However, the defendant was represented by attorney at law Paul Fungafat, who told the court that the night in question his client caught a taxi along with 3 other persons and the tablet was found on the ground and not on his client. Bail was refused and he is scheduled to reappear at the Georgetown Magistrates Court on June 12, 2014. Cabinet Secretary Dr. Roger Luncheon today offered all assurances that the decision made to invest in the Marriott Hotel project is well researched and will soon exhibit fruitfulness. Details in this story.
Luncheon contends that the decision taken by the government to invest money acquired from NISL into the Marriott Hotel project will prove viable.
Addressing the tourism product and developing Guyana's tourism product make investment along the lines of the Marriott necessary and almost inevitable. You could quite understand the response that comes from the visitors as they become comfortable in knowing that Ramada Inn and Marriott are present here in Guyana.
For the Luncheon explained that there is a lack of A-grade facilities to accommodate visitors, and Marriott will change this situation.
I can tell you about the mad scramble to find accommodation, and not any type of accommodation. Accommodation with a big E. It is clear that the offerings are inadequate as Guyana becomes more and more a destination for tourists, and as our tourism brand improves.
He explained that the investors took their time in deciding whether to finance the project because they were considering if such a venture would be profitable.
This stage took longer than expected as investors in equity and in debt reassured themselves beyond any reasonable doubt about the project's viability and other important considerations. Most would see the bank's successful financing as the most definitive evidence of the project's viability, accordance with acceptable investment and financial practices.
Further, Luncheon lamented that the continued criticisms about the project should have long been put to rest.
The recent disclosure of the details of financing provided another opportunity for these antagonists to engage in the criticisms, rehashing all the points and pandering to the same interests.
Reporting for the Evening News, Svetlana Mar.
Quick action by residents and the Guyana Fire Service averted a major fire disaster last evening at Belwest. Jomo Paul reports.
While one house was destroyed by a fire last evening, expeditious response from the Guyana Fire Service and neighbours helped save another house that was home to a family of 6. The neighbours told this newscast that she was asleep when her daughter woke her up with the dreaded news.
Me was sleeping, and my daughter got test tomorrow. She was sitting in the hall, in the chair study, and by then she said she hear like, I can't say what kind of noise she hear, but she hear like something, a break up, and she said she see like a big fire. So she said, you know, little children is like think that whole leg and whatever. So she said like one whole leg a come and she see a big ball. So she get up easy and she peep to the crease. And when she see the fire, she run come, she hold on for me, she shake me from the bed, mommy, fire there over there.
The woman also said that the persons who occupy the house are in the interior and that the house does not have any electricity.
Me don't know them by the right name, but Mumsy and Uncle Derek. That's my neighbor. Oh, the neighbor me call for?
No, that's okay.
Oh yeah.
Who lives there now?
There. They got some rent. Some people rent the house and live in there, but right now they're not the home. But then come the last weekend.
Neighbors contended that the circumstances surrounding the fire were fishy, noting that the occupants were there last weekend. Where this newscast left the scene of the fire last evening, fire officers were still conducting their investigations. Bisham Mohammed, The Evening News.
In this report, we will hear that the Private Sector Commission is concerned about the present crime rate in Guyana. Gabriela Patram reports.
Chairman of the Private Sector Commission PSC, Ramesh Bisot, said that the body is very concerned about the rise in criminal violence here, especially attacks on businesses, and is calling on the Guyana Police Force to increase its surveillance. He made reference to the stats that at the end of March 2014, robbery under arms overall increased by 21%, with 285 reports compared to 235 for the same period in 2013. The stats indicate an increase of 38% in the number of armed robberies involved the use of firearms, and a 4% decrease in armed robberies with instruments other than firearms were used by the perpetrators.
Private firms have to pay a lot of money to ensure they have security, and as you would have been discussing with me earlier, there is an increase in the incidences of robberies, which worries us, all right? Because private businesses need to operate in an environment that is stable, and security is a concern for us. And any increase in crime whatsoever is going to be impacting our business.
Meanwhile, the PSC chairman disclosed that business has been slow for the first quarter of the year due to the lack of investments from both local and foreign businesses.
Generally, we've noticed for the first quarter of this year that from our members, we have found that business is a little bit slower than expected. As you might have noticed over the weekend, that gold declaration is down, and there are many other issues affecting business. With this deadline for anti-money laundering legislation looming.
However, the chairman explained that the lack of investment is due to the non-passage of the anti-money laundering bill, which continues to haunt businesses and investors.
From the Private Sector's Commission perspective, a legislation to fight crime, a legislation to fight corruption, a legislation to reduce the incidences of criminal underworld and all of that, should be passed. And that's how the perspective it should be seen from, all right, as a legislation.
The chairman stated that the PSC will continue to make representation for its members and Guyanese so that they can ensure that Guyana becomes a better place for all to live. For the Evening News, I'm Gabriela Patram.
You're tuned to the Evening News. Stay with us. Welcome back. This is the Evening News. 9-year-old Joseph Osborne of Lot 45 Freeman Street, East La Penitence, Georgetown, has been reportedly missing since last Thursday after he did not turn up for school, leaving relatives to believe that he may have run away from home. At the time of this disappearance, he was staying with his parents' friends along with his sister. His mother is reportedly in the interior while his father lives in Barbados. This is not the first time the lad has left home because of issues, as he did so about 3 months ago. Annette Osborne, grandmother of the missing child, told this newscast that she was at home on Thursday evening when she received a telephone call from his guardian inquiring about his whereabouts. The woman added that the police are looking into the matter. She, however, claimed that he is due to revisit the optician's office on June 17 as he has an eye issue. Anyone with information on the child is asked to contact a family member or the nearest police station on telephone numbers 218-3000, 664-8503, 675-0727. Several officers from the legal system are undergoing a 3-day training course on combating the illegal firearms, ammunition, and explosives here. More details on the training program in this report.
The training session is being hosted by the Ministry of Home Affairs and is funded by the U.S. Embassy. It began today and will conclude on Friday. The course will be conducted by instructors from the United Nations Regional Center for Peace, Disarmament and Development in Latin America and the Caribbean. Speaking in the ceremony, Home Affairs Minister Clement Rohi said that because Guyana is closely surrounded by other countries, it is difficult to manage and combat trafficking at the borders. Nevertheless, the minister pointed out that his government remains committed in the global fight against illegal firearms.
We are committed to fighting the illegal trafficking in firearms and the components of firearms as well as explosives. The fact that we have borders with so many countries and the constant claim of our porous borders is indeed a challenge in fighting this problem.
Meanwhile, the U.S. Embassy's Deputy Chief of Mission, Brian Hunt, noted that the issue of illicit trafficking is a serious problem. As such, countries should collaborate to address it. Hunt urged the participants to take advantage of all the information that will be provided to them during the training so they can better perform their duty.
I'm confident that the information that is going to be provided to those of you taking part in the course will be not only from the theoretical but very much from the practical perspective, and that when you leave here you will leave better trained and better equipped to go forward within your own society to put into practice the methods, the international best practices that are going to be shared with you.
UNLIREC representative Juliet Solomon said that this course will provide guidance to judges, police, and prosecutors when handling trafficking of firearms cases. The course will see 24 participants from various agencies, including the Ministry of Home Affairs, Legal Affairs Ministry, Director of Public Prosecutions, and the Guyana Police Force. For the Evening News, Shania Singh.
Women writers are being honored via an exhibition which is underway at the National Library.
The Ministry of Human Services Resource and Documentation Center, in collaboration with the National Library on Tuesday, launched an exhibition to honor women writers in Guyana. The exhibition features the collective works of some 50 female writers from around Guyana. Though most of the work exhibited is more on the contemporary side, the oldest writer featured was Miss Beryl Gilroy, who passed about 80 years ago. The chairman of the National Library Committee, Pitamber Prasad, announced his pleasure in having the opportunity to honor our women writers. The chairman stated that women were faced with heart-rending circumstances, adding that it is a proud moment for all women producing prize-winning pieces of literature. Deputy Permanent Secretary for the Ministry of Human Services, Patrick Finley, said it is fitting that the exhibition came right on the heels of Guyana's 40th independence anniversary. He said the environment created by this particular skill and the talent and creativity of some Guyanese writers speak to the fact that Guyana's development as a society goes far beyond economics and technology. For the Evening News, I'm Gabriella Patram.
The Trinidad-based Caribbean Public Health Agency, CARPHA, describing the chikungunya virus and dengue fever as growing public health threats in the Caribbean, says it will convene a special networking symposium in June. It said the June 12th event will be held in collaboration with the Caribbean Knowledge and Learning Network, CKLN. The symposium will enable clinicians, researchers, and network engineers to share experiences tackling and managing dengue fever and the chikungunya virus in the Caribbean and Latin America. Importantly, practitioners will learn how the dedicated high-bandwidth research and education networks in the region, CaribNet at redclara.com, can support and facilitate the collaborative work among the various health-related communities and researchers. Join us after these messages for more news. Welcome back. It's now time for a look at what's happening in the region. It will cost in excess of Barbados $300,000 to stage the two-day crusade in that country next month, featuring celebrity evangelist Benny Hinn. This was disclosed yesterday by Reverend Fernandine Nichols, one of the driving forces behind the National Alliance of Churches and Christian Organizations, the organizers of the crusade called the National Miracle Healing Service and National Blessing. His revelation comes as voices opposed to Hinn's visit were raised in some quarters yesterday. One significant objector was Reverend Vincent Wood, head of the Emmanuel Baptist Church, who serves on the nominating committee of the Baptist World Alliance. Wood said it is an insult and very offensive, and the group should apologize to every God-fearing minister or gospel, or those who are interested in the gospel, who are living for God as well, and those who are trying their utmost to lead Barbados and its political leaders to commit their lives to Jesus Christ. He called on the organization to disclose the retainer sought by Hinn. Now, internationally, author and poet Maya Angelou, who rose from poverty, segregation, and violence to become a force on stage, screen, and the printed page, has died. She was 86. Wake Forest University announced Angelou's death in a news release Wednesday. She gained acclaim for her first book, her autobiography, I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings, making her one of the first African-American women to write a bestseller. In 1998, she directed the film Down in the Delta, about a drug-wrecked woman who returns to the home of her ancestors in Mississippi Delta. She was the poet chosen to read at President Bill Clinton's first inauguration in 1993. She wrote and read an original composition, On the Pulse of the Morning, which became a million seller. It's now time for a look at your bridge reports. The Demerara Harbour Bridge will be closed on Thursday, May 29 at 5 hours for a period of 1.5 hours. The Berbice River Bridge will be closed on Thursday, May 29 at 17 hours 05 for a period of 1.5 hours. The Parika and Supernam ferries will be departing at 4 a.m. on Thursday, May 29, 2014, and both ferries are also slated to depart their respective locations at 17 hours on Thursday, May 29, 2014. Join us in the other side of the break for your sport news. Welcome back. You're tuned to the Evening News. It's now time for a look at what's happening in the world of sport. But first, your headlines. Aggrieved members shunned Matthias' invitation to go public. Dozens graduate from coaches' workshop. Hundreds participate in World Challenge Day activities. And Calcutta Knight Riders into IPL final. Our sportscast is brought to you with the kind compliments of Macorp.
We believe that everything worth building should be built just once. But that is why we build on culture, on trust, on integrity. We exist to do more, better, faster, safer. Your success depends on the foundation it's built